Starting at verse 45. Therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. "What are we accomplishing?" they asked. "Here is this man performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. And then the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation." Then one of them, named Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, spoke up. "You know nothing at all. You do not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than that the whole nation perish." He did not say this on his own, but as high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the Jewish nation, and not only for that nation, but also for the scattered children of God, to bring them together and make them one. So from that day on, they plotted to take his life. Therefore, Jesus no longer moved about publicly among the people of Judea. Instead, he withdrew to a region near the wilderness, to a village called Ephraim, where he stayed with his disciples. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, many went up from the country to Jerusalem for their ceremonial cleansing before the Passover. They kept looking for Jesus, and as they stood in the temple courts, they asked one another, "What do you think? Isn't he coming to the festival at all?" But the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that anyone who found out where Jesus was should report it so that they might arrest him. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here, a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about 1/2 liter of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. "Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages." He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. "Leave her alone," Jesus replied. "It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me." Meanwhile, a large crowd of Jews found out that Jesus was there and came, not only because of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priests made plans to kill Lazarus as well, for on account of him, many of the Jews were going over to Jesus and believing in him.
Morning, you lot. Take a seat, would you? Well, for those of you who haven't met, my name is Steve. I'm pastor here. My job is simply to open up God's word to you, and you've probably already picked up by the song that we're singing here that, do you know, we treasure Jesus Christ. He is our hope. To become a Christian isn't merely to assent to a stack of beliefs about somebody from history 2,000 years ago. It is to actively put your hope and your life in the person of Jesus. And sometimes we need to be sustained in that. And many of us here have put our hope in Christ, but every day we take the knocks of life. We realise that heaven is still something we're waiting for. And so what do? We build ourselves up with God's word open before us. So please, would you make sure that you have got his precious words to you, to us today, open in front of you. Make sure you've got a church Bible there. And we're going to ask now, we're going to stop, we're going to pray, and we're going to say, living God, please would you help us to see. If there are things that only faith can receive, would you grant us the eyes and the faith to receive them? Could you help us to see who Jesus is today? And many of us, we're in different places on our spiritual journey, but can I assure you of this? The living God wants to meet with you, me even, today. Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, as we open your word, please would you help us. We're so often confused, we're so often overrun by crisis, We wish we were better people. We know we have a need. But if there is a living God, one who speaks, one who saves, we want to dare to believe today. So would you overcome our unbelief with your precious word? Would your Spirit attend and help us to grow and be comforted and to be changed as we meet the force that is Jesus? For we ask in his good name. Amen. And so you know what the ripple effect is, don't you? When I say the ripple effect, what do you think of? Do you think of a little body of water and a pebble? What happens when you take the pebble and you drop it into the water? It ripples out. It's almost unstoppable until it carries a long way. Okay. What happens when the pebble moves from a pebble to a rock? What happens to the ripples? Okay. Did you know that a tsunami, there are two ways in which you can start a tsunami? Because a tsunami is a ripple effect, isn't it? You can either have the side of a mountain or an island just shift and drop into the sea, or you can have an earthquake from under the sea, go boom, force enters into the water, and what happens? Tsunami. Now, for those of you who haven't been with us, and for those of you who need a prompt to the memory, let me remind you where we're at. The tsunami has landed. The force of the living God in the person of his Son, the Lord Jesus Christ, has landed on planet Earth. And John's Gospel that we're digging into now, we're in chapter 11, there are 21 of them altogether, is confronting us with the force of heaven in the person of Jesus. And we've seen through the previous 10 chapters that he has done sign after sign, miracle after miracle, 7 of them in fact, that reveal his force and his power and his person. You get to see who God is by what he does. And the crescendo of that we looked at last week. Can you believe it? I can't believe in a modern society, a secular age, we're talking about somebody being brought back from the grave. Chapter 11, last week, we saw how Jesus stood in front of a tomb and did what so many of us have wished we had the power and authority to do. He stood where somebody had died and he beckoned a dead man out of a tomb. And for the only time in history, it came to pass. The force of Jesus on planet Earth. And so we're moving into a strange few verses in this next little bit here, because Jesus barely features. But the ripple effects of him landing, his force being dropped onto planet Earth, will be seen. And they're going to be stark. And let me tell you this. You have to deal with Jesus. We realise in our country that there's so many church buildings that testify to Jesus, but we forget because we've got our social media, we forget because we've got the busyness of life. But this bit of the Bible is telling us that every man, woman and child, every soul who has ever lived will one day have to deal with Jesus. And the way in which that will happen will divide people. And we're going to see this 2-section story. We're going to see what the ripple effects do to people and what we will do with Jesus. Now I love this because the place where it all hinges on is, I've said that, hold on, Christ, he's a force landing on planet Earth, but he's a force that invites us to evaluate his worth. So can I tell you whether I'll tell you now whether you'll get anything out of what we're looking at today. By the end of it today, you'll find yourself in a decision point. You'll be evaluating the worth of Jesus. You won't be the first. Maybe you've done that on many times before. Maybe you can even preciously remember the days when the worth of Jesus came at you with the force of a freight train, and you realised that your life would never be the same again because you bumped into Jesus. And maybe you need reminding of that. Maybe some of you have walked in today and you felt, do you know, I'm coming here because I do it dutifully. It's what I do on a Sunday. I remember days in the past where the salvation and joy of Christ in my life seemed to light up every corner, but it's just gone a little bit dim. Can I tell you, there's a real good chance that light might be reignited today when you see and consider his worth. So what was happening? Have a little look at the first verse that we've got there, verse 45. Therefore, that means ripple effect. What will come out of Jesus beckoning a dead man out of the grave? Him showing his force at work in the world, showing his grace and power. Therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary, that's the sister of the guy who had been raised from the dead, Lazarus, had seen what Jesus did and believed in him. Now let me just stop for a second. It doesn't mean believe that Jesus is somebody significant. Do you realize that there's a big difference between belief that and belief in? What they did was saw something so significant that it rehung the way that they understood life. They realized actually there is a real living God. He did make the world. His Son has entered in, and his power is available and at work to put the curse right. And they said, I want to buy into that. I want to be part of that story. It wasn't a wistful belief, and sometimes we dare to say that, oh, I wish I had your faith, I wish I had your belief. No, this is rational, it is reasonable, it is evidence-based. They are confronted with Jesus, and they have no choice but to respond. But that wasn't the only response. The rest of this chapter is marked by a more insidious, cruel response that actually reveals what our deepest problem is. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. This could have gone so much differently. Maybe some of you, like me, have been on the receiving end of if somebody has a complaint, you form a committee. And they pull together all the big men. And they were like, this has happened. Now what they could have been doing and should have been doing is rather than forming a committee is baking a cake. Jesus here is seeing new life come where there is death. He has fed the 5,000. He has made somebody born blind to be able to see. And rather than sort of breaking out the maracas and doing a party dance, they just want this out of their world. Have you ever been in a situation where even the mention of the name of Jesus and people just want shut of him? Let's read on and find out some more here. What are we accomplishing, they asked. Here is this man performing many signs. Notice they don't deny what Jesus has done. They don't deny it, but they don't want to face up to it. And the question is, why? Why wouldn't you? Life is breaking out in the places where Jesus is. People's lives are being changed. The world is becoming a better place. Peace is here. Why? And they tell us. Here is this man performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, I notice that as if they've got any control over him. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and then the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation. Can I tell you this? This is true of your soul as much as it was of them. What you fear losing tells a story about what you live for. Can I say that again? What you fear losing, do a just quick audit of your own heart here. Where are your fears based? What you fear losing reveals what you live out of, what you live for, what rules in your heart. Dare I use a spiritual word? What you worship, what you say you cannot live without. And here were these powerful men, the cultural elite of the day, and they were in love with their position, with their power, with their prestige. And Jesus is bringing new life to the masses. The rule of the kingdom of God is setting people free, and all they're thinking about is protecting their version of the life that they want. Remember, the Romans were a real threat. The Romans installed them and gave them a degree of power and control over that area on two conditions. Number one, keep the taxes flowing in. We need the money. Number two, don't let the people get out of control. And if either of those two things were broken, these men's lives, as they have defined it and set it, would be under threat. And they cannot have that. It terrifies them. But they are so wedded to their version. Do you notice how it says they will come in, the Romans will come in and take away our land and our nation? Now, any of you who've opened the Bible more than a few times will remember, whose land and whose nations was it? Who did it belong to? Who were they supposed to represent? Whose was it? It was granted, and I love this. Here's a little tip. It's not in my notes. You ready? What you have in your life has been given to you by grace. Oh, listen, I know some of you have worked hard and taken your lot and tried to make something of it. But even the lot that you have got, your talents, your abilities, your relationship, your address, the breath in your body, your measure of health, it's not yours. It was given to you by God. If he stopped thinking about you for a millisecond, you would cease to exist. And this is the character of our God. This speaks of his bounty and his generosity. He gives to us that we may give back to him and enjoy fellowship and relationship. Instead, what have they done? They have taken what he has given and they said, we're going to use it for ourselves and we want him out. But they did it in the name of religion. There's a hypocrisy and a stench that is going on there. But they have built their little kingdom and they will... Have you noticed when somebody threatens the way you want your life, your reaction isn't muted? It's rarely calm, it's rarely rational, and more often than not, it can get vicious and ugly really quickly. Here are these fellas, and they are in total meltdown at the force, the tsunami of Jesus. It's rippling into them, they're confronted with him, and because rather than celebrate the power and grace of God bringing new life, they just want to protect their life. Now, some of this will sound familiar to you because some of you have loved people around you who don't yet know Jesus enough to have brought Jesus into a conversation. How did that go for you? Were they like, oh, tell me more? No, maybe they were polite and said, I haven't got time for this right now. Maybe they were more, who on earth do you think you are telling me? I just don't need Jesus right now. Why? Because they're protecting their land and their little nation. And so we see something of the human heart here. We're not purely rational. You know that. Anybody who's been in an argument knows that. In fact, the Bible teaches us that our hearts, though we have received so many good things from God, our hearts are twisted out of shape, and we have this inbuilt prideful stubbornness that says, I want to be God in my life. And when the true God rolls up and makes himself available to us, rather than do the rational thing, believe the signs, believe the miracles, yes, Lord, you're good, Lord, you're kind, Lord, what do? We want to kill. We want to be God in our own life. And the chief in this story was the chief priest of the day. I tell you, he was a weasel. If you've got more time, chase up the name of Caiaphas through the rest of the Bible. But we meet him here. Can you read that in the next verse there? Let's have a look. Then one of them, named Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year, spoke up. Now, this guy was a political operative. He had managed to stay in one of the most unstable, power-hungry, power-scheming areas and councils that you could imagine. He's managed to stay top dog for a while. So you know this guy's shrewd. You know this guy is probably pretty ruthless as well. But this guy is also under the living God. Listen to what he says. You know nothing at all. So he's like using his power to impose his intent. You do not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than the whole nation perish. He did not say this on his own, but as the high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the Jewish nation, and not only for the nation, but also for the scattered children of God, to bring them together and make them one. So from that day on, they plotted to take his life. Oh, I just think this is amazing. It's like, if we let him, as if you can argue with that, everyone would believe in him. Would that really be that bad a thing? We'll come and take our land. And Caiaphas is angry, and he says, I'm going to do the maths here. It is better that Jesus take the wrath of the Romans than the whole nation. And in so doing that, this small-minded, puny man reveals the way that God works. Do you know how God works? People come against him, and with total calm, he uses the movements against him to fulfill a better purpose. Because can I tell you the good news today? It is God's intention that he remove from each one of us our greatest enemy. And I know right now you've got a whole list of things that are going on in your life, and you're like, that maybe that one, that one, that one, that one. But our greatest problem is not the wrath of the Romans. It is the wrath of a holy God against people who have walked out on him. And though the high priest on that day said, we're going to use Jesus as a scapegoat to keep away the wrath of the Romans, the Lord was going to use that evil intent that he came up with and he thought of to remove the greater wrath that is coming at everybody for shaking their puny fists at God. God supplies himself to carry the weight of our failure. All of this gospel story is about the willingness of Jesus to come and be a substitute. You see, in our pride and in our arrogance, we substitute ourselves and put ourselves in the place of God in this world. And God comes in and he could batter us. And that would be fair and that would be just. But he comes in and says, I want to substitute myself for you. I want to carry the weight of your sin. The wages of sin is death. But the gift of God is eternal life, and it has to be paid for, and my son is coming with willingness. He will die for the nation. He will carry the sin of the world. He will set the disparate people, even as far as Speak in Liverpool in 2023, he will come and set us free into the life that he intends if only we would receive. So this puny-minded man spoke better than he knew. And I love that in the Bible because the Lord always works through irony. You know what irony is? It's this sort of strange reversal of the moment. In that moment you think you know the story, but there's only one who knows the story, and his name is the living God. And so it could feel almost as if Jesus is at the whim of other people. But no, he came in with a clear intent. His intent was to say the only way that people like you and me can know resurrection in our life is if he goes into death. He shatters the grave by being put into a grave. He overcomes sin by becoming sin. He destroys death by death. And he extinguishes wrath by bearing wrath. That's just what Jesus did. Don't ever doubt that God loves you. What's the greatest thing that anybody has ever done for you? Can I tell you, it will only be the faintest of echoes of what this present force of Jesus, what this person is willing to do, because he loves sinners. That's just what he does. And can I tell you, the theologians have grappled with this strange dynamic here. You see, those evil men, they intended and they thought with their brains, and in their own minds they decided, we want to kill Jesus. And yet they did that because God had already decided that he was going to put himself in the place of sinners. Who made the decision? Was it Caiaphas? Or was it the living God? Who was it? Was it him? Was it him? Yes, is the answer. Yes. Man makes decisions, but God makes the ultimate decision. And I want you to be encouraged and comforted by that, because it means our God won't be defeated. It means that when it looks like he's losing, guess what he's really doing? It might look like the cause of Jesus Christ is being undermined. It might look like moments where in the public eye, in community life, in our culture around the world, his purposes are being defeated. Where does he win his greatest victories? Through where it looks like he is losing. Does it sometimes feel like you are losing in your life and being a Christian is the hardest thing Can I tell you, in those moments, the living God is working his best works. Is that something you can take to him today and say, Lord, this moment feels like it is winning. I know you are. Help me to trust you. And will I be able to look back and say, where I thought death was entering in and winning, life is reigning victorious. And so we see that in just a small way. They decide to put up the wanted posters. They decide to put him into witness, or he has to go into witness protection. Therefore, Jesus no longer moved around publicly among the people of Judea, because instead he withdrew to a region near the wilderness, to a village called Ephraim, where he stayed with his disciples. It looks like they've made him run away. But watch what happens. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, many went up from the country to Jerusalem for their ceremonial cleansing before the Passover. And they had totally forgotten about Jesus because he wasn't around. Is that what it says? They kept looking for Jesus, and as they stood in the temple courts, they asked one another, "What do you think? Isn't he coming to the festival at all?" But the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that anyone who found out where Jesus was should report it so that they might arrest him. Do you see what's happened? The more they try to crush him and make him go away and tell people don't be associated with him, the more the people want to know about him. Jesus wins. Do you want to know what the end of the world is? Jesus wins. And listen, I'm not a winner, but I can be with a winner. I want to be part of his victory. He will have the last laugh, and he invites us to share in that. Hallelujah. And so they've dismissed his worth, and then we get this beautiful snapshot to the end of our reading today, chapter 12. It's like a total contrast. Here's people who have experienced the force dropping in, and they're riding the tsunami, but their response is totally different. Let's have a look at this beautiful family meal. Chapter 12, 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived. Even that is a miracle, because a week ago, where had Lazarus been? He'd been in a tomb. Don't miss those little throwaway. Where he lived. And do you think he was living? The whole family were thrilled. The emotion of grief had given way to resurrection, and it had broken into their home. Their home. Jesus was there. Verse 2. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served while Lazarus was amongst those reclining at the table with him. Can you imagine that was the hottest dinner ticket in town? You know, they're reclining and they're chilling at the table. And you know what everybody wanted to ask? They're like, "Lazarus, lad, I mean, did you see a white light? I mean, what happened? What was it like?" And of course, the Bible is intentionally quiet on all of those issues because that's not the main event. Who is the main event? The one who the dinner is for. It's for Jesus. And they can't help themselves. They want to overflow. They just want to praise him and delight in who he is and what he is doing. They sense his worth. Something of the power of God has broken into their life. And they're just like, can I tell you, listen, for those of you who aren't sure and are fearful about the idea about throwing your lot in with Jesus, what does it mean when you respond to Jesus and receive something in? What happens next? A party. A feast. Do you want to know in the New Testament the way that heaven is most regularly represented? A feast. What does that tell you about the character of God? He's not the head teacher who's trying to bash everybody and say no fun. Who were the no fun people in here? The committee of the Sadducees, the people who are against Jesus. Who were the fun ones? The people who are near Jesus. There is something to celebrate. But then it gets socially awkward. It gets very socially awkward. Look what we read. Martha was serving while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about half a litre, in some versions a pint, of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. Let me give you a little bit of background to this. I take it nobody, I went to your bathroom right now, I'd open the bathroom cupboard and find a pint of pure nard, would I? It's not really, Listen, even if you have Yves Saint Laurent perfume, it's not that. The nard plant was native to sort of northern parts of India. It was incredibly difficult to get a hold of nard. And then it had to go down the Silk Road from northern India all the way across to Palestine, so the shipping lanes and the supply chains were incredibly dangerous. If you were to have just a small amount, you would treasure it. But a pint of that, and as it comes up later, is basically a year's wages. So you work that out in an agrarian society where people don't have any beans to rub together, they don't even have wardrobes because they haven't got that many clothes to wear. To have this treasure, can you imagine how much you thought about it? In many ways, it would symbolize your life. It was your investment strategy. It was your pension. It was an heirloom. It was so precious to you. A pint of pure nard? Are you kidding me? And have you noticed in our life that quite often there'll be something in our lives that becomes to us a symbol of what we could be, who we are, our value, our worth? I guarantee you, in that household, it was that pint of nard. Now, I don't know whether it was pre-planned. The story doesn't tell us. We don't know at what point during the feast it was. We don't know whether she did it nervously. All we know is she did it. She took this treasure, worth so much, and she moves over in the direction of Jesus. As she moves towards him, there's probably the warmth of his smile, and she's feeling it. And she finds herself stirred with an unexpected level of emotion. And she could do the only thing that she knew how to with Jesus. The third time in the gospel stories that we meet her. The first time she is seeking mercy, she falls at his feet. The second time, she falls at his feet in grief because her brother Lazarus has died. But the third time, she comes bringing this pint of nard. And she falls at his feet where she's been so many times before. It's a great place to be around Jesus, by the way. She falls at his feet, and I don't know whether she intended to use all of it or not. Judas was furious that she used all of it. But something of an extravagant outpouring in the moment, because she sensed the worth of who she was with, that he would come into their home, that he would do for her what he has done for her, that she would feel that safe, that she would know her future was so safe she didn't need the pension. And she gets down on her knees, and maybe it's just a drop to start off with. And excuse my French, and she's like, this is Jesus, to hell with it. And she just starts pouring it out all over him. It says onto his feet, but typically the tradition back then was once it starts, it would probably have gone, it filled the house, the aroma. She just wanted to pour her life out into Jesus. Religion can't do that for you. Religion and the fake safety it offers is, if I do my bit, he'll give me my bit. This isn't religion. This is devotion. This is, he's given me everything. I just want to show his worth in this moment. That doesn't make sense to a lot of people. It certainly didn't to Judas, did it? What are you doing that for? And with this hiding his greed behind feigned compassion, hiding his other motive, he's like, what on earth is going on? That could have been given to the poor. But this is Jesus. It is a joy for me, being part of a Christian community, to watch the way, over time, and sometimes in dramatic, extravagant moments, you guys reveal how much Jesus is worth to you. You pour out your time. You pour out your money. You give yourself away. And as people from the outside look, they're like, That don't make sense to me. Why would you give of the most precious things to you? Isn't God the God who just says he blesses you and you give him a bit back, and you just pay him off a little bit? It won't make sense to people who don't know the worth of Jesus. That you just want to be at his feet and you want to give the things that are most precious to you, that he's given you anyway, back over to him and say, look, Lord, I love you. I love you for loving me. Can I put it this way? It's very simple. When you're around Jesus, you celebrate because he always gives you more than you deserve, and he always gives you more than you desire. Without fail. Can I say that again? When you're near Jesus, he always gives you more than you deserve, and he's delighted to do it. He never comes back to you and says, yeah, but I'm expecting big things from you. Because he knows that our potential is somewhere right down there. And some of you live under this horrible cloud of feeling that because Jesus has given you, you owe him back. No, he gives freely. But that doesn't mean it's without effect. You get change where you want to give back to him because you sense his worth. He always gives you more than you deserve. But he always gives you more than you desire. You see Judas here, and he had hitched his wagon to Jesus so that he could get the life that he wanted. Power, money, significance. And when he sees that the way of Christ is the lowly way, he feels aggrieved. And so he's kicking off. And his biggest problem, influenced by the lies of Satan, is that he doesn't realize that Jesus will give him even more than he asks for. He always gives you more than you want. Listen, countless times you have gone to Jesus with a list of what you think you need, and it's been quite bold, shall we say, and you've thought that that is the very best thing for your life. And you've gone to him and wondered why he didn't answer the way you wanted, and haven't even considered the possibility that he wants to give you more than you ask for. Maybe you're just asking for the empty wrong things. Oh, it might not be a bad thing. It might be a good thing. But the Lord Jesus, whenever we are near him, he always wants to give us more than our desires. He knows us. He is that kind of God that he says, I know what is best for you. And my best is the only thing that I will settle for you. Hang in there with me. Will you believe on me for that? And so as I look at this devotion of Mary that speaks so much of his worth, I'm stirred by that, and I want you to be as well. Maybe you're a little bit like me in the fact that there's times when I slip more Judas than Mary. I'm like, okay, I've served you a bit now, Lord. Could you have things calm down, or I'll keep this little bit back for me. And then I look at Mary and I think, actually, Lord, would you help me to get there? Would you help me to be restored to that place where anything in my life, anything at all, is up for grabs and at your disposal in a way that is pleasing to you? It was the former English cricket captain in the late 1800s, C.T. Studd. Can you remember the famous quote? Some of you know it. I had to write it down because my memory goes halfway through sentences these days. If Christ be God and gave himself for me, then there is no sacrifice too great for me to make for him. Is he wrong? He's not. Do you believe that being near to Jesus is worth that much? Listen, some of you are sitting there and going, I need to do something for Jesus. What should it be? And I want to be really cautious about saying what it should look like. Because if I do, you'll slip back into religious mode, won't you? You're like, oh, I don't really want to have to give that, but I'll give it. Right, fine, I don't have to give it. That's not what this is. She just poured it out. It started with a drop. And if you're not sure what to do, just give them a drop and see where it leads. It will probably involve your time, your money, sometimes your dignity in front of people in social circles, and others are going, why are you doing that for Jesus? You'll only know when you know his worth. Some of you are looking back right now on things that you've done as expressions of love for Jesus, and you're saying, I wonder whether that was enough. Can I just warn you against that? Because it means you're slipping back into that religious mindset of, Jesus does for me, therefore I do for Jesus, rather than freely just giving away. I wouldn't be surprised if there is somebody in this room who just today, this week, just needs to do something dramatic. I can't prescribe what it is. Would it be too dramatic to say, empty half your bank account, give it to the people we saw on the screen? I don't know. Would it be, pick up the phone to somebody who you've cut out your life because they're just too hard work and say, I just want to tell you about what Jesus has done for me. I know we're at odds, but can we restart a conversation because I want you to have what I've got, even though there's tension there. Would it be maybe that somebody's like, do you know what? I need to cut my hours because my work and my concern for stuff is getting in the way of me encouraging and building other people up towards Jesus. I don't know. Some of you do the drip, 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 the drops of the nard week by week. You turn up again and again to offer grace in the name of Jesus to people. And maybe some of your friends who don't yet know Jesus are looking on and going, why do you even bother? You know, it was nice talking to Debbie earlier this week where you had some of your colleagues come in and they saw how you volunteer. And you said to me afterwards, didn't you? Oh, it makes sense, but you could tell that they didn't get it, did they? Made no sense. It will look like you're pouring out for no reason. Can I tell you, every time you've turned up to try and love on somebody in Jesus' name, outwardly it might look like a waste, but if it was done for love of him, it will resound forever. Can we be a church who, when we do, when we give, when we sacrifice, we don't become like the world which tries to measure results? We just give it over. I do it because I love Jesus. And so let me wrap up by telling you about John Bunyan. Some of you will have read his book, Pilgrim's Progress. At one point it was the second most published book in the whole of the world. But Bunyan was locked up for preaching the gospel and telling people about Jesus. And he was a pastor of a church, so he was away from his congregation for a long time. That pained him deeply, and so he was incredibly excited about the prospect of getting out of prison. But just before his release, he was really conscious that his congregation around him saw him suffer well. Because quite often when it comes to moments of difficulty, when life isn't going quite the way that you want it, you really reveal what you're building your life on. And so he responded to a section of scripture where the Apostle Paul talks about feeling the weight of the sentence of death in a world that wants rid of Jesus. And this is what this guy, John Bunyan, wrote. In this scripture, I was made to see that if ever I would suffer rightly, I must first pass the sentence of death upon everything that I properly could be called a thing of life in my life. Even to reckon myself, my wife, my children, my health, my enjoyment, my all as dead to me, and myself as dead to them. Do you see what he's saying? In the light of love of Jesus, he doesn't want his wife dead. He's saying that those things are no longer the things that I live out of. I've got all of them put to the disposal of Jesus because he's worth it. Can you conceive of the worth of Jesus today? Take that small amount that you can conceive even if it has stirred and moved you greatly, if you multiply that by 10,000, you're still not even close to the worth of a Saviour who loved me and gave himself for me. So he has given everything for us. Are we willing to just surrender to Jesus and join the party? Would you pray for me that that would happen in my heart and life? Wherever you're at in your spiritual journey, if there is more to see and live out of, to respond to the worth of Jesus, would you ask him now that he would take you on that path? To help us, we've got a song to sing. Which one is it we're singing now, Matt? Jesus,